Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. As the Carolina Hurricanes are fresh off of a Stanley Cup win, the question becomes, Rod Brind'Amour, what's his legacy? Is he one of the greatest North Carolina coaches of all time? Our friends with the 7 o'clock news, Dan Haggerty and Ashley Rowe, had this conversation and gave their list. Now, I had a conversation with WRAL sports anchor Chris Lee, kind of going over his list and looking at the bigger picture, all-time North Carolina athletes. Here's that combo. Chris, okay, so let's just start with this notion of a Mount Rushmore, right? Yeah. When you envision a Mount Rushmore in sports, what comes to mind? What does that look like?
The greatest who've done it in whatever the category is, right? And I know Dan and Ashley had some rules that they set and some parameters around theirs. And within those rules and parameters, they found the greatest that they saw based off of those. So that's what I see, like who's the best that fits these rules and parameters.
And I think that's key because there are so many different ways you can try and set up a Mount Rushmore. Yeah. Even like the OG Mount Rushmore, like the actual like mountain monument, right? It wasn't like they're like, okay, top 4 presidents, ready to go.
Right,
like that's not. It was like each president represented a specific like kind of notion of like American history or something along those lines. Yeah. That's why you see someone like from George Washington to like Teddy Roosevelt on there. Yeah. They're the components.
Sprinkle some U.S. history in there.
Exactly. Keep you on your toes. The components that we or that they did in the 7 o'clock was number 1, winning. Number 2, triangle identity. So Bill Belichick, obviously, a lot of success.
Yes.
Not all of it came in the triangle.
Yeah.
That kind of being that idea.
He only has 4 wins here.
Exactly. Number 3, impact on program or sport. Number 4, the impact outside of the triangle. Yeah. And then a couple of like little tiebreaker type things, you know, iconic moments and a unifying power, essentially. That's kind of how they phrased it. So I'll give Ashley and Dan's, and then I want you to react to that, and then we can go over ours.
Okay.
So Ashley's was Rod Brind'Amour, Mike Krzyzewski, Dean Smith, Kay Yow. Mm-hmm. Dan's was Rod Brind'Amour, Mike Krzyzewski, Dean Smith, and Jimmy V. So those are their 4. Your thoughts just on those lists in general?
As we were talking before we started, recording here, there's going to be a lot of names left off.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you do a Mount Rushmore, it's only 4. But, you know, for what's there, I think those are for each one. They each chose 4 people who I think would accurately represent what the rules are within that. And so I don't think you can disagree with those names on there at all.
Oh, I'm not mad about any of those people.
Although
we know
I might make you mad a little later.
As I look into the camera here, we know that anyone watching this or listening to this is going to get mad about this. That's one of the biggest things about these Mount Rushmore conversations, right? Yeah. Is somebody comes from the top rope and is just so upset about whatever you may choose. They'll be mad about the concept of a Mount Rushmore in general. Yeah. So with all of that being said, and by the way, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, these were coaches for North Carolina specifically, coaches. So let's go to your list, Chris. Who would be your Mount Rushmore of North Carolina coaches?
I would include Rod, and he's newly included because of the Stanley Cup win. So he's there. Dean Smith, Mike Krzyzewski, and I would put Anson Dorrance.
Okay.
I had a different one when I spoke to you earlier, but as I thought about it, it was just like, what are some of the different sports? And Anson Dorrance, for a very long time, like the NCAA National Championship for women's soccer, basically lived at UNC Chapel Hill. I think there's been total about 45, 46 of them, and Anson Dorrance has 22.
Yeah, over 20, I believe. Yeah.
So almost half, and the reason why it's getting less than half is because he's just not coaching anymore.
Sure.
So you have that level of winning, and then the amount of women's soccer stars that came through the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill under his watch. I think you have to include that.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And that's what all of this comes back to is there are so many coaches that you could include in this list. Like it is an example of just like the richness of North Carolina athletics, just in general. My list is Mike Krzyzewski, Dean Smith. I included Jimmy V,
Okay.
And it was back and forth between like Jimmy V, Everett Case is kind of like this like NC State component.
Yeah.
And my fourth is Roy Williams.
Mm-hmm.
For the record, I went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, so I understand that there is that. Keep that in the back of your mind. Keep that in the back of your mind.
We don't have to call a timeout here. Just keep going.
Just letting you know. Stop. Classic. But so, and I think too, Kay, Dean, I think they are obvious choices.
Yeah.
I think I had this notion of doing Kay, Dean, Jimmy V because of like what that triumvirate kind of meant for college basketball in the area.
Yeah.
But I mean, Everett Case, I think did such a pioneer for college basketball in general, winningest all time at NC State. I mean, the ACC tournament MVP trophy is named after him.
Yeah.
Rod, I think like my only concern with Rod at this point is that from a coaching perspective, it's still 8 seasons, although I don't know how much more successful his 8 seasons could potentially go. Yeah. The Stanley Cup win is definitely the thing that elevates it.
Yes.
Going back to what Ashley and Dan's kind of parameters were, is they talked a lot about cultural impact.
Yeah.
And that starts to become this question of how you put together this list based on that cultural impact.
Yes.
I almost kind of viewed it, I think, through the lens of like a North Carolina past where college basketball is king. Like whether it's men's or women's, like everyone is playing ball. That the kind of 1950s, 1940s through the 2010s, through 2020, like where it's just everyone lives and breathes college basketball. I think with like hockey and the NHL and that cultural impact, I think that's massive in Raleigh, and it definitely is massive in the state of North Carolina in general. But I think that could be where things are moving in the state. I think I went kind of more the traditional path with mine.
I get that for yours. I think one of the reasons for me to add Rod outside of the fact that he just won a Stanley Cup as a coach was also just the fact that we saw 192,000 people in downtown Raleigh.
Yeah, it was a lot. That's fair.
For a
That's
parade.
fair.
And all of those people weren't just from the Triangle area. There's people who drove in to be a part of that. And you talk about those coaches that you mentioned, all great coaches. Of course, I have a couple of those on my list as well, but they represent almost this division of a certain part of the Triangle.
Right. Versus
Rod Brind'Amour is probably the first coach to have this type of a wide impact in the state of North Carolina that everybody, maybe not everybody, but for the most part, most people will like him. There's no if you don't like him, it's because you're from Philadelphia and they knocked out Philadelphia, or you're from Ottawa and they knocked out Ottawa, or you're from Las Vegas. That's the reason why you don't like Rod.
Right. You're like a Rangers fan or something.
Yeah. There's not like another hockey team across the street that can pull you away from Rod. So there is this kind of forward thinking on my part, and probably for Dan and Ashley, with Rod and where hockey is going, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And especially when you find out 192,000 people came.
Oh, yeah. It was a big group. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of shows what he can do to bring the area together himself that maybe others couldn't do because of the rivalries, which did make this area so great.
Sure.
It does make this area so great.
And that's definitely what makes this North Carolina unique, is that it's, it's not everyone's rallying around like a Michigan,
for sure.
Or everyone's rallying around, even a Tennessee or something like that, right? You have all of these different fan bases, and that unifying power, I think, definitely was a tiebreaker for their list.
Yes.
I'm not, listen, Rob the Bod. He's that dude. He's that dude. Get him in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I think that it's like in a few years, right? Like, let's say, even if you just take Rod's career and double it in length, let's say 8 more years, at the least, right? Tom Dundon said he's got a blank check. He can stay there however long he wants. He will be on this Mount Rushmore eventually. I just think it's like, right now for me, he would be like 5th. And I understand that my kind of like nostalgia, in a sense, I think with Roy ties into that. But I think it's just really, it's a difficult thing to put together, and honestly the fact that it's 4 on a Mount Rushmore, like, that's the number I think that really makes
tough.
this conversation difficult.
5 is so much easier.
It's so much easier. Some honorable mentions, just to kind of go over. I want to touch on the ones here that Ashley and Dan mentioned, and then I think we have some more we may want to throw in there as well. Roy was their first honorable mention.
Yeah.
They had Kara Lawson as an honorable mention, which I thought
it was a little too soon.
It's a little too soon. I think I agree. I agree. Karen Shelton, like if you want to go continue to go down those like Olympic sports type routes, I mean 10 NCAA titles, I think that makes a lot of sense. They mentioned Anson Dorrance, and Everett Case was another one of theirs. So those were some of the honorable mentions that I mentioned off top. Were there more you were thinking of?
Yeah, I would probably throw in John McClendon over at NC Central. He's one of the pioneers of the fast break, and also like we don't talk about the impact of HBCU sports enough. And when we talk about kind of where basketball grew in the state of North Carolina, John McClendon definitely had his hand in the middle of that from an HBCU perspective.
Yeah.
And even, he was one of the ones that, influenced Dean Smith to run the fast break. Right. So like you don't have a Dean Smith without a John McClendon. And so I think, he's somebody to put out there. His resume probably doesn't look the same because of the level of competition.
Sure.
But he was amazing at what he did when he did and with the resources that he had available to him. I would probably also add in Clarence Big House Gaines, who was a head coach over at Winston-Salem State for a very long time, and the different people that he had come through the program. I mean, Winston-Salem State is just a small Division II school, barely hanging on to Division II. And they had folks like Earl the Pearl Monroe come through that program, and other former NBA stars who came through Winston-Salem State. So there's a lot of smaller coaches on smaller levels that I think should at least be brought up.
Right. I would agree. A couple more. Dr. Leroy Walker at NCCU, track coach for a long time, was the first African-American president of the U.S. Olympic Committee. And you also have some more of those coaches in that kind of like Olympic track and field space. George Williams, at St. Aug's, like 39 NCAA Division II titles. These were also some names that people reached out to Ashley and Dan at the 7 o'clock show, like, hey, what about these folks? Someone threw in Wes Moore, which I think in the Kara Lawson realm is like a little too early. I would put Kay Yao in that spot over Wes Moore.
For sure.
If it was just like a Raleigh Mount Rushmore, I think you got to talk about LaVelle Moton. Like if it was just like a Raleigh Mount Rushmore, then I think that would be like, Rod, LaVelle Moton, like insert NC State coach here, like something like maybe like Phillip Rivers, someone like that. Sylvia Hatchell was another name that was thrown out there. Richard Petty, like totally, like not even considering the racing, aspect of things. Like there's a massive name, like the King,
That name's going to come up later. Spoiler alert.
Oh, there we go. So now, so those are some of the other honorable mentions. It is hard to do something like this. Everyone's going to get upset, but I think it is it's just this really great notion just how successful athletics and impactful athletics have been in the state of North Carolina just throughout the course of especially like the past 100 years or so. Now, we talked about the coaches, but you can't end this conversation without doing just the all-time greats. You went first for the coaches. Do you mind if I go first for the all-time greats?
Go for it.
So this is just all-time North Carolina Mount Rushmore. This is not what Ashley and Dan did, but we're just going to add one more level to it just to kind of put it out there. In no particular order, Dean Smith, Michael Jordan, Julius Peppers, Mia Hamm, which I put together that list and I said, that's all Tar Heels. Like it's like oops, all berries, like Captain Crunch. You know what I mean? And listen, if the coaches list is hard, the all-time greats, just players, coaches, all the above, that's even harder. Because there just have been so many. There are sports that are getting left out there, all of that. My thought was Dean's impact culturally as well as through the game of basketball can't be overstated, right? If you got a Presidential Medal of Freedom, chances are, you're going to be on a list like this. I think Richard Petty has one too. Just throwing that one out there. Michael Jordan. Okay, next. Julius Peppers. That's someone who I think, because of the ties to the Panthers especially, how much more North Carolina can you get from
Southern Nash to UNC to the Panthers?
It's like it doesn't get much easier than that. And then I included Mia Hamm because of her impact both collegiately. Was it 4 or 5 years they won a national title with her? I think the 5th year she was redshirting or something like that. the World Cups, the Olympic gold medals, and just what she did to help inspire a generation of women's soccer players that would eventually rise to like the current generation that we look at, and the great success that team on a national, international level has had. Those are the four I went with, and that just kind of felt like these are the answers.
You can't argue with any of those, honestly.
Right.
Like, I mean, those are all solid.
And it's probably going to be the same with your list. It probably would be the same with your list that you put out there. Like, it's going to be the exact same kind of situation. What were your four? We
have a couple who are the same.
Sure.
So I put Michael Jordan, Classic. A lot of obvious reasons. Julius Peppers, a lot of obvious reasons. I did the spoiler alert earlier. Richard Petty.
Yeah.
You can't talk about North Carolina and the North Carolina sports culture without mentioning NASCAR or car or race car driving in general.
Mm-hmm.
It is especially huge where I'm from in the Triad. The Triad is the market in the United States of America that eats up NASCAR the most. It's where I came from. So like before here, I'm not used to like working a Friday night without doing ARCA racing, highlights. That's how deep it is over there. Like you didn't include ARCA racing.
Right.
That's not the thing over here. Right. But Richard Petty is the king. He's the guy, and he's from the Triad area over there outside of Asheboro. And then the last one I picked is not going to be a surprise coming from me, but it's a little outside of the box.
Okay.
Ric Flair.
Oh, yeah.
16-time world champion, but a lot of his impact as a pro wrestler was in the state of North Carolina. He essentially helped put Charlotte on the map as a legit market when it came down to sports. Like out before there were the Carolina Hurricanes, before there was the Charlotte Hornets, before there was the Carolina Panthers. The thing that brought people together outside of Duke, North Carolina, NC State, in this state, and outside of NASCAR was pro wrestling. In this very building that we're in, Ric Flair wrestled here many times. At Dorton Arena, he sold out Dorton Arena plenty of times. Not just Dorton, Greensboro Coliseum, Crown Coliseum in Charlotte, and different other locations around the state of North Carolina. And he proudly wore North Carolina on his back for a very, very long time. They call this place Flair Country, and I know from my inner workings with the world of pro wrestling, people want to come here to wrestle here simply because Ric Flair stepped foot here and put North Carolina on his back. Even though he's not from North Carolina, he's from Minnesota. But I think that when you think about big-time sports figures, and you may disagree with whether or not pro wrestling could be considered a sport, I do at least consider them athletes. And so if you add him in the world of sports, and especially the cultural impact, Ric Flair definitely, to me, has to be on that list.
I love it because like my favorite thing about like having this conversation with people, like top four, whatever it might be, is that there is no objectivity here.
Yeah, there
is no here is the correct answer.
Yeah,
like that's just everyone is going to be each person's list is going to be influenced by what they've grown up on, what they've seen, what they've heard, how they
went to UNC.
I mean, sure,
I'm a pro wrestler.
Exactly. Like so you have these like kind of personalities to each one of these lists. And I think that's one of the coolest things about taking some time to put all this together. I do think, kind of circling back to what initially sparked all of these conversations with the Hurricanes and Rod winning, right? If there's going to be a rep from the Hurricanes, it's going to be Rod Brind'Amour, or unless you can just package all of the stalls together and like just stall. But it's going to be Rod Brind'Amour, and if they keep doing what they're doing, we've already talked at length about how the Hurricanes could be right back here in this exact same position next year. Mm-hmm. It's going to be hard in a few years to leave Rod Brind'Amour off of any Mount Rushmores. I think that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I struggled with that, putting him on this list because of him as a player and as a coach. But because we already talked about him as a coach, that's one of the reasons why. But it's like, again, going back to that number 4, like that's tough.
If it was 5,
because
it'd be so easy.
But I would say this though, if he did replace anybody on my 4, it would be Julius Peppers. And I hate saying that.
Interesting.
And the only reason why is because Julius Peppers didn't win a major championship professionally with the Carolina Panthers. Rod won as a player with the Carolina Hurricanes and now as a coach. So that would be the one person. And maybe that's recency bias. Maybe it's because I for 8 months out of the year, I get a chance to interview him and cover him and things like that. But that would be the thing that in my head would potentially replace him. I guess another honorable mention for me would be Chris Paul. And
sure,
it's not necessarily he didn't win at a high level, but 20 years in the NBA, I think third all time in assists. In NBA history. But outside of that, his impact on the grassroots level. Team CP3 as an AAU program has fed Duke, North Carolina, NC State, Wake Forest for years. He has a pipeline of guys who are in the NBA because of his tutelage and what he does in the offseason in Winston-Salem and in and around, mentoring these guys. Co-owner of TST. We've seen the impact it's had in our area. Also co-owner of the Winston-Salem Dash, and just what he's done as an entrepreneur and as a mogul in the state of North Carolina to help other people. And I think it's a little bit understated. I know NC State fans will hate me saying this for obvious reasons, but I think that Chris Paul deserves to be in the conversation. He's not in the top 4, but he deserves to be in the conversation.
Yeah, and there are so many people like that. Phillip Rivers, I mentioned earlier, but that's probably the one for NC State football that you'd think of. I think you look at you could even go back like a Charlie Choo Justice, like those type of personalities. But when Bryce Young wins MVP in the Super Bowl next year, is he on this list?
He's gonna have to do a little bit more.
Do it twice. Do
it twice. He's gonna have to do a little bit more for me.
That's Chris Lee. I'm Luis Fernandez. For all things North Carolina, head to our WRAL YouTube page. Be sure to like and subscribe. And another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.